got this small survey in the Austin Chalk, just outside of San Antonio. And I've got 3 wells that produced 158,000 barrels of oil at 2,100 feet. So I had a client who was interested in chasing shallow oil, and he shot a beautiful 30 square mile survey, recorded it at 1 millisecond, processed it at 1 millisecond. So I have beautiful data, and it was 55-foot bends. So statistically, you don't get much better than that in real life in the Gulf Coast, for sure. I had gathers. I had all the angle stacks. I'm still dealing with a carbonate, but carbonates have AVO signatures too. And what you just have to look at is you have to look for peak events instead of necessarily trough events. So it was exhibiting, the top of the Austin Chalk to me was exhibiting an AVO response, but because this was on a 1964 well and it was long depleted, although there's always residual left in the ground, I just assumed that this meant that it was really good quality rock with porosity. And when I did my SOM, and here's my recipe here, the perforations, which are the red little lines in the well bores, tied perfectly to this yellow neuron. And then you see below that yellow all this red, and you see above it a little bit of gray. And when you look at the kind of, you're looking on the right side is the blow up, on the left side is a little bit more regional view. You don't see that anywhere else in that reservoir. And I have for years and years and years called this, the upper portion, I've called it a halo neuron, because all reservoirs leak regardless of how deep or shallow they are. And the beauty of paradise is you pick up very subtle rock property changes. And so when your reservoir leaks, especially a carbonate that's probably fractured, before it gets into the complete seal of the shales above it, it will leak enough to change the rock property. And that's what you see on that kind of gray looking stuff above the yellow. That is the leak into the shales above the Austin Chalk. The red, believe it or not, is a dim out response. Now, dim outs in the wavelet world are very hard to see. You have to have hellacious reservoirs, really thick, before the eye can visually pick up the frequency changes caused by the seismic signal going through that reservoir. In the sample world, I see these dim out features very, very commonly. And again, if you look at the peak to trough ratio there, you don't see any changes in this. This is where the using sample statistics gives you so much more insight into the stratigraphy and the deposition. So I want to look at that perforation neuron, and I want to look at the dim out neurons and look at how they relate to the map. So I have now in this color, I didn't change it in Paradise. I can change these neurons to any color I want. So the number 71 color corresponds to the perforation neuron, or the yellow neuron in Kingdom, and all the green ones correspond to the red dim out neurons I had previously. So kind of get your mind wrapped around the color differences. And my client, when he came to me, said they had already spent $20 million in here. They shot the 3D. They drilled 3 pilot holes and 2 horizontals as all dusters. And that's when they said, Sacrey, we got to figure out what's going on in here. Their whole idea, and this is chasing 158,000 barrels produced in 3 shallow wells, right? They thought they had a hot deal. And their whole assumption was that this was a fracture or fault trend play. So they were trying to place their wells along the faults and not coming up with anything. And I was sitting here and I'm looking at that map and I'm going, well, you know, but that looks more like a channel sequence to me. It doesn't look like a fault sequence or a fracture sequence. And so I pointed that out to him, and then I was looking at, but I'm looking at, when you're looking at something like this, you're looking at 100% of the data points in each cluster. When you run a self-organized map in Paradise, you get 2 volumes. You get the classified volumes that you've been looking at, and then you get another volume called probability or low probability. And the low probability volume, what I'm showing here, is that what I found over the years when I'm looking for prospects is that the most anomalous data points on the edges of the clusters are where your AVO anomalies are. That's where your production is. You're looking for something that's really anomalous, pertinent to that cluster. And so the whole cluster, all the data points in the cluster is the background noise plus the anomalous data points. If you turn off all the background noise and only look at the 10% most anomalous data points, what happens? The production, the area that had been produced, disappears. But all the rest of the data we just looked at is live. So I'll go back. Okay, now you see the red up there, dry holes. They drilled a lot of dry holes down around those wells. But you can see the area that those 3 wells produced from. And when you turn off all the points except for the top 10%, that area goes away. There's your depletion right there. So everything else that you see in here, all the reds and greens, that's still live oil. It's still anomalous. So that's where you want to go drill. Unfortunately, when we started getting into it, you know, one location we picked was in a graveyard. One location we picked was in this guy's swimming pool. This is just outside of San Antonio. And since they shot this 3D, the area had exploded and the culture was so great that there probably wasn't a pad site that we could find, because it's hard to deviate a well when it's only going to be 2,100 feet deep. So we're still looking at this, but we're taking it further out of San Antonio to do that. But the point here is, not only can you change someone's mind about their ideas on what causes this prospect, you know, you've changed, they shot it for a reason and they drilled dry holes for a reason, because they had a play type in mind that we were able to show them it didn't, that play type wasn't there, but it's also to be able to see the signs of depletion.